My name is Bryony Dunne. I'm a visual artist and filmmaker. My work here at TULCA is called Drifting, and it's been presented at the Museum of Marine Biology and Zoology. It's been shown within the permanent collection in the museum, so that's quite exciting. I've positioned it in one of the diorama little cabinets boxes that's there. It's quite a privilege to have the work positioned right beside the original collection, and as a way also to bring audiences to the museum and to have that relationship between my work and the existing work that's in the museum. So the last year and a half I've started to work with sculpture, mainly ceramic as a material to work with sculpture, and the work was produced on a residency in the Netherlands at the European Ceramic Workshop. It's black ceramic, and part of it is a kind of like a green porcelain with photographs printed onto it, so it's very, very thin, the little photographic pieces. They're kind of like image transfers. It's interesting that students, it's still a kind of like an active education space, whereas when I was installing the work today, there was a class in there, and this engagement with students, and it's an education space, and how these, the Blaszka collection, how these little sea creatures were used for educational purposes. And my work, I suppose, I see it as this kind of like fact-based fiction. It's based on a myth, the myth of the goose barnacle, on how this author believed that these birds hatched from this type of barnacle. He called it a barnacle tree. It was this kind of myth that explained an eggless reproduction of this bird. And people at that time, which was around the 11th century, they had a misunderstanding of bird migration. And even though these birds migrated to Canada every year, the author it was an attempt to try and understand where these birds went, but also their reproductive systems. So this myth was produced, and it was really up until the kind of the mid 19th century that myth was kind of rolled out. I think it's quite interesting in how this work is then kind of put in a space where that it's used to educate, but it's kind of like it distorts and kind of comments on that process of understanding and forming knowledge. And when a curator has the ability to kind of draw a show like this and kind of web together all these different connections on how works kind of fit together and how they relate together and how they speak to one another, I think just going back to my work on how I draw this kind of an extension of this myth of the goose barnacle to this story of a US space rocket that failed to launch back in 2015, and it was washed up ashore on an island in Cornwall, in Scilly, and attached to it was all these goose barnacles, and it drifted with the same current. These goose barnacles were attached to the spaceship, and the fact that the spaceship came from Florida and it circulated with the currents, and just the kind of the absurdity and how the kind of the story of the expansion of knowledge and this desire to acquire knowledge, of this kind of acquiring knowledge from outer space, whereas Gerard of Wales from the 11th century was going to Ireland to acquire knowledge, but how all these kind of connections are weaved and webbed together, which across time and space which is in many ways what a kind of like a curator of an exhibition like this is doing. It's kind of weaving all these stories and people together in some type of beautiful way. So